Good afternoon. Welcome to the free state of Florida. It's great to be with you. I appreciate everyone coming here. Thanks to ALEC for hosting it here. I'm known for certain things, free state of Florida, school choice, fighting woke, all these other things. But maybe the thing I'm known for most in this group is I am an Art Laffer Award winner. And I saw the award back there, and I saw Art coming in. I don't know that they've announced who's getting it coming forward, but I know that carries a lot of weight. So let me just say, whoever does get it, congratulations, and you have now joined rarefied air and people that have won the Art Laffer Award. So thanks to ALEC for doing that. I want to thank Danny Perez for all his work, as well as Speaker Paul Renner from Florida, and all the members of the Florida legislature who are here, and even those who are not here. We were able to work together to complete, which was the most productive and far-reaching legislative session in the history of the state of Florida. And you can go down the list of so many different things, from cutting taxes to school choice, to parents' rights, to anti-ESG, all these different things. Anything that was on the menu, we got it done. And I campaigned for re-election alongside a lot of these guys. Every single thing we told the voters that we would do, we did, and then some. How often do people promise and over-deliver? They usually under-deliver, and so I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful for all the other state legislators here today. The fact of the matter is, it is in Republican-controlled state houses across the country that big wins are being done on behalf of freedom. And we can see that by where people are coming from and where they're moving to. And so there's so many different states, and I ran into some of the folks from Iowa and Utah, ran into Stewart from Utah, ran into folks. You guys are doing great work, and we compete with you. If you guys do something we haven't done, Renner and these guys, they start working to make sure we're doing it. And I know a lot of you have been able to watch Florida and work with us too. And that's very, very healthy, and that's very, very productive. All the good policy in this country are being done by state legislators that have a conservative majority. So thank you for supporting freedom in this country and preserving it against a lot of hostile forces. And it's important to acknowledge that, because the fact of the matter is, this country is in a state of decline. Economic decline, military decline, cultural decline. And if we look at states that are governed by leftist politicians wielding leftist ideology, those states are symptomatic of the larger decline in our country. And I can cite you statistics, but all you have to do is look how people are voting with their feet. Those states that impose those anti-freedom policies are hemorrhaging businesses, hemorrhaging residents, and they're hemorrhaging wealth. We see crime going through the roof in many of the urban centers in these areas, and their education systems have declined dramatically as those policies have taken hold more and more. So this should tell us, compared to a lot of the success we've had in our states, where the debate is about the future of our country. The decline of our country, though, is not inevitable. The decline is a choice. It's a choice we as Americans will be making in the ensuing months and years. I believe that Florida shows the way to reverse our nation's decline, restore sanity to our society, and usher into this country a new birth of freedom. We have, in Florida, shown the way on how to have a strong, robust economy. Our economy is now ranked #1 in the nation by U.S. News and World Report overall. And I know some of you states have some competition there, and there's some other states doing good. We have a large budget surplus, a AAA credit rating. We actually embarked on an accelerated debt repayment program just this year, so we just retired an extra $400 million of state debt early, saving the taxpayers almost $25 million in interest costs. Since I've been governor in 2019, we've retired almost 25% of our total state debt. Don't you wish Washington was doing something like that? Florida ranks #1 in new business formations. Our unemployment rate is the lowest amongst all large states and way, way below the national average. We've ranked #1 for economic growth amongst the big states since I've been governor. And we just concluded a legislative session where we provided a record amount of tax relief in the billions of dollars. I think the record prior to me becoming governor was a few $100 million in a year. We just racked up $2.7 billion in tax relief in one legislative session. And of course, like some of the states that are here, Florida does not have an income tax. For those of you who do, you should try it our way sometime. I think you'll like it. We also have one of the lowest per capita tax burdens in the entire country. So we're proud of all of that, but at the end of the day, we would not have been able to lead on the economy. I think we've had more wealth move into Florida in the last 3 years than has ever moved into a single state over a similar period of time in all of American history, if you can believe that. But none of that would have happened had we been not willing to buck the orthodoxy when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic measures and lockdown measures. And those were things that were being preached upon from on high by people like Dr. Fauci, and they said it was going to be 15 days, but in reality, they wanted to go on in perpetuity, a relative perpetuity, and they probably would have gotten away with it if states like Florida had not said, no, we're gonna go a different way. So we said very simply, people have a right to work, businesses have a right to operate, and kids have a right to be in school in person 5 days a week, and that's just the way it's gonna be. Fauci doesn't care about your freedom. He doesn't care about your job or your business or the education. And so you needed people in elected office to stand up for people when nobody else was willing to do it. And at the end of the day, the reason why we were able to do well is because when it wasn't easy to stand against the grain, when we were taking a lot of incoming, people think like I'm taking incoming now. I was taking way more incoming in 2020, let me tell you, with COVID. And it's easy just to go with the crowd. It's easy to say, well, the bureaucrats are telling me we can't do any of that, and so it's not up to me. You can do that, or you can lead, and you can put the freedoms and the jobs of the people you represent over any short-term political considerations. And so that's what we did. We fought for the people of this state when nobody else was willing to do it. And what shows in the election, so Florida had been a competitive state for a long time. I won by a narrow margin. My predecessor had won by a narrow margin. The presidentials had typically been 1-point races. And we were able to win in 2022 in a year that was not a red wave nationally. We were able to win by almost 20 points, 1.5 million vote margin, which was historic for a Republican in the state of Florida. What it shows you is if people see that you're willing to fight for them, if they see that you're willing to take arrows for them, they will come out and support you. They will be willing to crawl over hot coals barefoot to be able to support you. They just want to know that you're willing to fight for them. And that's what we did in Florida. We need that nationally, because if you look at what's going on in our economy nationally, we have a lot of problems, many of which are government-induced problems. We're in an era of persistently high prices and inflation. When they say inflation is slowed, the prices are not coming down, they're just going up at a lower rate. Why is this happening? Because government, starting in March of 2020, with the COVID and the Fauci lockdowns, borrowed, printed, and spent trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. And I think it's been said that there's nothing more expensive than free money, and what we've seen in the last few years shows that that's the case. The fact of the matter is, if you could just borrow and print and spend without any limit, Why not just do 30 trillion or 50 trillion, right? We'd all live happily ever after. But we all know that is not the way this works and that the bill comes due. So now you're in a situation where you've had persistently high inflation. We have very tepid economic growth, may even end up being negative very, very soon. Interest rates are high, which makes it difficult for people to be able to afford to purchase a home. If you purchased a home 4 years ago compared to now, between the increase in home prices and the interest rates, you're paying at least double in monthly mortgage payments than what you would have done even 4 or 5 years ago. We see cars are more expensive. And so for people that are just working, doing the right thing, this has got to be one of the worst economies they've had in their lifetime. And it's your government that helped bring that into effect. And the Federal Reserve has been a huge part of the problem on this. One, just having perpetual quantitative easing, which is something that benefits people with a lot of assets. And you see asset inflation. It has not produced results for people who are working and middle class. Their job at the Fed should simply be to maintain stable prices, not to be an economic central planner, not to worry about social issues or climate change or any of that stuff. And so they've dropped the ball first by printing too much, but then also trying to act like the inflation was transitory when it was obvious that this was something that was going to be an issue. I mean, Milton Friedman said when you start going on spending and borrowing binges, you're going to get inflation 18 to 20 months later, and that's exactly what happened, and the Fed acted like that no longer applied. So they've been a big problem with this. Another big problem has been our monstrous bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. that stifles innovation, that is actually probably helpful for a lot of the biggest companies because they get a competitive advantage over smaller competitors. But for small and medium-sized businesses, they get whacked every single day. And it's bad enough the policies that they're doing. These policies are not policies oftentimes even enacted by the elected representatives of the people. They're done through nameless, faceless bureaucrats issuing rules about what kind of energy you can use, what kind of car you can drive, whether you can even use a gas stove in the future. Florida, in our legislative session, we made gas stoves tax-free, so you can see where we stand on that. But they're exercising massive amounts of power through a fourth branch of government, which is not constitutionally accountable to the electorate. Our founding fathers did not design a system like that. They knew that it would abuse its power. So we really have a mission in front of us to reconstitutionalize this government and to no longer have a fourth branch of government, but to return to 3 branches of government, which is what the founding fathers envisioned. And why is that important? Yes, thank you. And why is that important? Because part of the reason we have tepid growth and have had tepid growth for a long time in this country is because government is choking off a lot of the creative energy in our economy in a lot of these sectors. We need to get back to 3% growth in this country or more. And if we can't do that, we're not going to ever fix our budget problems. We're not going to be able to compete with China and the CCP. So everything we do needs to be geared towards opening up the ability to grow more. You're never going to be able to hit those growth targets with the regulatory monstrosity that we have in Washington, D.C. So you want to talk about draining the swamp? That's where you start with that bureaucracy. We also have an administration that is just so out to lunch on, okay, we have competitors in this world like China, you have countries like Russia. The last thing you would want to do, knowing the picture that's going on, is to kneecap your own domestic energy production. And yet that's exactly what we're trying to do. So we need to open up our ability to produce our own energy, use the resources that we have. It's good for families because they'll have cheaper energy. It's good for businesses because that impacts everything they do in terms of their costs. It's good for our industrial base. Let's permit more pipelines. Let's do all this stuff. That'd be really good. And it is good for our national security. You want to control your own destiny when it comes to energy. and China is oil poor. It's a competitive advantage for us. When you're trying to force people into electric vehicles, first of all, that's not the proper role of government to do that. If you want that, you can buy it. A lot of people don't. So don't do that stuff. But when you're doing that, you're giving China a competitive advantage, because where does most of the stuff come from that goes into creating these parts? It mostly comes from China. So you're giving them an advantage on a silver platter, and it makes absolutely no sense. So that is something very easy that we can be doing that'll have a huge impact on the daily lives of Americans and a positive impact on our economy. We also need to understand that what the Biden administration's doing and other states are doing to try to politicize our economy is a dead end. Things like ESG, environment, social governance, all that is a pretext for them to be able to use the economy to advance their political agenda. And that could be anything, at any different time. It is a violation for a public company's fiduciary duties to depart from doing what's the best business decision to indulging in some of this social activism. It's not good for shareholders, and it's not good ultimately for the economy. You can't have companies taking positions on all these different issues. If that's the expectation, we are not going to perform optimally the way we would want to. So ultimately, ESG is about more control over the economy. These are corporations that are effectively doing the bidding of a lot of ruling elites in government, and they're doing through the economy what they could never achieve at the ballot box, and that's a problem for constitutional accountability. So in Florida, we have kneecapped ESG in this state. It is not allowed in our pension system. We don't have social credit scores. They want your credit worthiness is going to in part depend on whether you bend the knee for the latest political fad. That is totally unacceptable. We also protected Floridians against things like ideological debanking, which you have seen, particularly from some of the big Wall Street banks. So it's not good for our society, it's not good for our economy, and it's ultimately not good for human freedom. And that goes for other measures that the federal government is thinking about doing to exert more control over our economic activity. And one of the things we have done in Florida is we recognize the danger posed to the proposed central bank digital currency that they're talking about doing in DC. CBDC is not in our best interest. It is not good for your privacy. It is not good for your economic freedom. They say, well, we're just thinking about doing it. Maybe we do it without Congress acting, which they don't have authority to do. In Florida, we said, we're not doing CBDC here, so we signed legislation protecting people from that. I don't know if they're going to try to do it unilaterally under Biden. I don't think Congress would likely enact it, but why is this not a good thing? What they want to do, they want to go to a cashless society, they want to eliminate cryptocurrency, and they want this to be the sole way that you can buy things. They're going to use that power to impose something like a social credit system. You know that's what they do. You have these people at the World Economic Forum, sitting there grinning oh, if they want to buy fuel or ammunition, we'll be able to put that's their vision. They want to be able to circumscribe your behavior to make it conform with their ideological objectives. And so CBDC needs to be DOA in the United States of America. We also need to recognize that threats to this country from China are not limited to military threats. The competition with China, our adversarial relationship with China is a tough problem because of the economic dependence that has developed in this country. When COVID hit, almost everything we needed was made in China. We could not get everything we need to function as a country right now without relying on China. That is not a healthy place to be. And if you look at the China policy over the past many decades, China has gotten very, very rich. China has become a manufacturing superpower. They've built up their military to where they're the second strongest military in the world, bar none, competing with the United States. Their GDP is actually forecasted to pass ours within the next 5 or 10 years. We've never had a peer competitor in any of our lifetimes that had a bigger and stronger economy than we did. When you look at the Soviet Union, that was primarily an ideological confrontation. Yes, military in the sense of the nuclear standoff, but their economy was a pittance compared to the American economy. We now have a competitor that could potentially surpass us. And so we can't let that happen. I mean, we have to win, but the way we win and they lose is to recognize we've got to do more of this in the United States. You can't subcontract out key parts of your economy to your top threat and your top adversaries. And we've recognized that in Florida. We signed legislation prohibiting the purchase of land by the CCP and its related entities in our state. They want to buy farmland, they want to buy land near military bases and other strategic locations. That is not going to work in the state of Florida. We're going to continue to keep this a freedom zone. But ultimately, when you're looking with the economy, the question is less about dollars and cents. I mean, that does matter, but it's really about what kind of society do we want to have. During COVID, when we had this, what I was seeing happening was a massive transfer of wealth from working class people and small businesses to some of the biggest entrenched corporations in the world, like Apple and Google and Facebook. And that was as a result of these lockdowns. That was not the type of society I thought was best for our country. And so in Florida, we were protecting people who were working in hospitality, who were working in construction, who were working in jobs where you actually had to show up and you couldn't do it in your pajamas on Zoom. So that was important, and then that's created more growth here, and it's created more opportunities for average people. So we're proud of what we've done in Florida. We need to get the federal government in line because it is failing this country when it comes to the economy. We've also led on the issue of education, and I know a lot of you in your states are working hard on this. We all probably are more attuned today than maybe many conservatives were 10 years ago on just how important it is to get the education issue right. Not that people weren't concerned about it, because they were, but we've seen such an attempt to use the schools as tools of indoctrination and all kinds of other things that we know we're not going to be successful as a country if we go down that road. So in Florida, we're proud to have been ranked #1 in the nation in education by U.S. News and World Report. When we had the first post-COVID NAEP scores, Nations Report Card, Florida ranked #3 and 4 respectively in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. I can tell you that wasn't true as a kid when I was growing up in Florida, so we've done a lot better than we did a generation ago. And it helped that we actually had kids in school during COVID, unlike some of these other states which kept them out for a year or more. Part of the reason we've been able to increase test scores is because we have the most school choice of any state in the country. And we've expanded it in this legislative session where we now have universal ESAs. But what's happened is parents now have options. They can go to a private school. We have 363,000 students in charter schools, which are public but not controlled by the school district and hence usually not influenced by the education unions. And then you have the 67 counties that all have their separate school district. And what's happened with the school districts is they want these students too. So they've actually embraced choice within their own district. So if you're in South Florida, like Miami-Dade, you can go to charter, to private, and probably a handful of public schools within your school district. 75% of the kids aren't even going to the school that they're zoned for anymore because you have so much choice. Because you have that, it's created healthy competition, and our test scores, where they used to be in the bottom 10, 15 states 25, 30 years ago, we now are in the top. And if you say 3 and 4 for the 4th grade reading, 4th grade math, if you control for demographics, we'd be #1 with that. If you looked at just our charter school population, which is disproportionately low income and minority, if that was a separate state, just our charter students, that would be one of the top performing states in the United States as well. So this works. We've proven that it works, and it's something that I know other states are emulating, and we would certainly encourage you to do that. We've also stood very strong for the rights of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their kids. It's sad that we're even having this debate, and this is personal for me and my wife because we've got a 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old at home, but we want parents involved in their kids' education. The only reason you wouldn't want the parents involved is because you worry that the parent would represent an impediment to you imposing your agenda on somebody else's kids. When Biden says they're not your kids, they're all of our kids, you know, that's what he means. Now, he's not talking about visiting his granddaughter in Arkansas or even acknowledging she exists, but never mind that, right? So they're not all of our kids. They're your kids. And schools and our school system doesn't exist to supersede the rights of parents. They exist to support the community, to support this important mission. And so we've embraced that in the state of Florida. We've listened to parents on things like eliminating Common Core, which we did early in my administration. We've also recognized the importance of recruiting and retaining good teachers. So we've put billions of dollars in increase for teacher salaries since I've been governor, but we said it can only go to teachers, not to bureaucrats and not to unions. And we actually did paycheck protection for teachers in Florida so the education unions can't do automatic union dues deduction from their paycheck. We've also drawn a very clear line in the sand. The purpose of our school system is education, not indoctrination. We want to have schools teach the basics. And so that's why we fought to do things like not have gender ideology in kindergarten, where they're telling students that they were born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. And we stood up to the left and the media and even big companies down the road here to make sure that we are standing on the side of parents and standing on the side of the innocence of our children. And that is a line we in the state of Florida are not willing to cross. We are going to stand up for our children. You also see, and you've seen the left try to demagogue that, you know, you get to this point. So we have curriculum transparency. You can come in, parents know what's being taught in the school. And unfortunately, there are things that are totally inappropriate that are being put, particularly in these early grades, things that are pornographic, for example. Now, if you walked into a 4th grade classroom and someone was playing an X-rated movie, you would take that movie out and that would not be appropriate. No one would say that you've banned that movie from society. So when they try to do book ban, that's a hoax. Nothing's being banned in Florida. You can do whatever you want as an adult, but to inject that into a 4th grade classroom, you know, is wrong. Adult material shouldn't be in a 4th grade classroom. You want to look at adult material, go watch Hunter Biden's laptop for all I care, but don't do it to our kids. So that's a hoax, and we fought back against that. They also now have a couple years ago did a law to prohibit critical race theory from our K through 12 schools, because we don't want them to use history and distort it to support a modern day agenda. You teach the facts. And so as part of that, they actually accused at the time, because you don't want CRT, you don't want anyone to learn about African American history, which that was a lie. And so we had the Department of Education, or the State Board of Education, had a working group of African American history scholars that really beefed up Florida standards. I mean, probably the most dramatic anywhere in the country. And you now have people like Kamala Harris trying to perpetuate a hoax saying that these African American history scholars, many of whom were black, some of them who descended from slaves, are creating a curriculum saying it was good? Are you kidding me? Who believes such nonsense? And so it's a total hoax, and it shows you, though, why are they doing that? Why would they come down when you have all these other problems, come down to Florida and lie about something that's readily checkable if you just look at how robust the standards are? And it's because they know in Florida we are contesting their right to use the schools to advance their agenda. We are teaching the honest history, good, bad, and ugly, teaching all the injustices with respect to slavery and a whole bunch of other things that happen. But that's not good enough for them. They want to wrap that in and be able to use that to advance their modern agenda. And these scholars were not interested in that. All they wanted to do was provide the facts. And so I'm glad that their lies have been exposed by people like Kamala Harris. And we're going to continue to stand up against phony media narratives when it comes to education. Final topic on education. We are also reforming higher education in the state of Florida. At the end of the day, our public university systems exist to serve the people of our respective states. They are supported by taxpayers. They don't have the right to just do whatever they want, regardless of whether it's benefiting the people who are funding them. You need universities to fulfill the traditional mission of a university, the pursuit of truth, academic rigor, preparing our students to be citizens of our republic. They are not meant to indoctrinate students in political ideology. That is not a good use of taxpayer funds. So we've laid down the marker on that. We've also now have in Florida, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. And we just signed legislation that the legislature passed that we've nixed this whole idea of DEI in our public universities. I don't know that it's constitutional after the Supreme Court's decision with respect to racial discrimination in admissions, but it is discriminatory. It's ideological. And DEI, we say, it stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public universities. So we've stood up for that. And guess what's happened as we've done it? We've seen a flood of applications coming. The media will say, oh, some of these professors are leaving like New College. Like, isn't that is that a brain drain? Well, if you're a professor in Marxist studies, that's not a loss for Florida if you're going on. Trust me, I'm totally good with that. But at the end of the day, I'll just leave you with this thought. When we're fighting the good fight, when we're fighting for freedom, you're fighting against the tide of the federal government, the corporate media, the institutional left, even sometimes people who claim to be on our side aren't willing to stand up for what's right when it really counts. And so at this stage, and the battles in front of us, really calls for leadership, and it calls for courage under fire. Because when you're standing up to do the right things, some of the things you all have done in your legislatures, what we've done in Florida, you are going to face blowback. They're going to sling arrows at you. They're going to call you names. They're going to lie about you. They're going to smear you. And the question is, are you going to stand your ground, or are you going to fold under those circumstances? In Florida, we stand our ground. We stand for truth. We stand for what is right, and we do not back down under fire. I appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless your states, and God bless these United States of America. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you. Godspeed.